Welcome to Raregivers 2024. My name is Cristol Barrett O'Loughlin, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you to the Microsoft Technology Center for offering to host our Raregivers broadcast for the third year in a row. I have a very special message that I'd like to share with you as we get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nathalie, and I'm the Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Digital. Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the founder and CEO of Raregivers, Cristol Barrett O'Loughlin, who has worked tirelessly to support rare families since the year 2000. Raregivers provides emotional support to families living with rare, chronic, and complex diseases. They support 22,000 rare families across 33 countries with plans to connect and educate 3.5 million caregivers, patients, and healthcare professionals by the year 2026. Recently, Microsoft employees volunteered over 300 hours to help translate the Raregivers methodology into a dozen languages and to build an interactive portal that helped Raregivers launch a global awareness campaign. Thank you to all the employees who volunteered their efforts. And now I'd like you to meet Cristol.
Well, thank you, Nathalie. What a wonderful introduction to our Raregivers Global Festival of Wellness. This is our 5th year participating in this experience, and I thank you for taking your time today. Truly realize that we all have so many things pulling on our lives, and for you to take just a bit of time to learn about our organization and our community, and also the really amazing stories that we're going to have the opportunity to share with you today. So whether or not you heard about us through volunteer efforts or through previous Give campaigns, we're just grateful for your attention today and wanted to share with you where to go when and if you feel inspired to make a donation to support our work. Raregivers, as Nathalie mentioned, has been operating since the year 2000, but it's only been in the last 5 years that we have been focused specifically as a nonprofit in the emotional well-being space. And so I'm hoping to inspire you today and show you what we're all about. And as we look at thinking about Raregivers on a global basis, think about Raregivers for caregivers. We actually work with caregivers, patients, and professionals in the rare, chronic, and complex disease space. So specifically, our philosophy is when life gets medical, people get emotional. And so often we're focused on the symptom management. We're so often focused on managing disease or finding treatments, finding cures. But along the way, our first response to any sort of diagnosis or even a worry about something we notice within ourselves or within a loved one is an emotional response. And we know that if we don't manage these emotional responses, they can really get in the way of our care, our personal care, and also get in the way of us fully being able to care for others and care for ourselves in the process. So just remember that tending to our emotions is just a core belief, and we're going to tell stories over the next hour to inspire you to really think about tending to your emotional well-being. The Raregivers Global Network provides emotional support, as I mentioned, to caregivers, patients, and professionals in rare, chronic, and complex disease communities. So we actually deliver daily compassion and relief to individuals who are feeling isolated and overwhelmed. And I think we can all really relate to this experience, particularly through the COVID pandemic. We lived the trifecta that medically complex families live every day: the isolation, the disruption in home and work life, and the uncomfortable feelings that come around with medical uncertainty. So that trifecta is something that our families are living with every day. The healthcare providers that are bringing relief into their lives feel those effects as well. And so it's our goal to connect 3.5 million rare givers by 2026. Seems like a huge number, doesn't it? But it's actually 1% of the need. Just 1%. But here's what we know about the 1%. If we can, at a grassroots level, emotionally support 1% of our global community, we can be the catalyst for the whole rest of the community to support itself emotionally as well. And we've witnessed this. We've witnessed this in military and veterans caregiving, in cancer care, in senior caregiving. We know that mobile first, multilingual, and thoughtfully executed programs that include the entire ecosystem of support for a family, that those systems of support can actually bring deep, lasting, meaningful change. And it's our partnership with Microsoft that enables all of this to happen. So thank you for taking the time again. And let me tell you what the day is going to be looking like. So we're living with some harsh realities in our community. There are zero cures for any rare disease. We have 100 years of science, and we're on the verge. All of the data-driven drug discovery, all the artificial intelligence accelerators that are happening in the research and science side of our community are going to make a difference. But in the meantime, we do have to live with these realities. And this is what we call a crisis in caregiving. So you heard Nathalie DeHers talk about rare is not rare. Rare diseases actually affect more people than cancer and AIDS combined. I mean, isn't that shocking? Every pediatric cancer is classified as a rare disease because these have genetic components to them, right? Rare diseases like Rett syndrome, cystic fibrosis, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, ALS, which is an adult onset rare disease, Pompe, MPS disease, and I'll talk about that personal experience with MPS in a moment. But in aggregate, 10,000 rare diseases, none of which have been cured, and a global community of 350 million people. So these are your neighbors. These are your friends. These are your colleagues at work. It's very likely that you know somebody in your life that is caring for or living with a rare genetic disease. It's 1 in 10 families in the United States and 1 in 15 families worldwide. Okay, so these are very, very common when you look at them in aggregate. And it is important to look at them in aggregate because the experience of caregiving, of loving an individual that does not have a cure for their disease is a very, very intense experience. And that's just, I can't even bring up the right words to explain what this looks like. So that's why we're going to tell stories today. And we're going to invite all of the really amazing leaders in this community and in various other communities to tell those stories. So think of this as like a little bit of like a watch party today, okay? And part of where this came about is through the hackathon, the Microsoft hackathon that Nathalie mentioned earlier. We participated in our 5th hackathon this year, and one of the outcomes of that hackathon was creating a global awareness campaign, a way for us to aggregate the stories that are influencing the public. The individuals that are telling those stories, we are nominating to be part of our Raregivers 100. And we'll be announcing the full Raregivers 100 in the weeks ahead. But in the meantime, I'm going to clue you into a couple of folks that have already been nominated for the Raregivers 100. And I'm going to bet that you've probably heard a few of these names. Satya Nadella, Bradley Cooper, Colin Farrell, and yours truly, Cristol Barrett O'Loughlin. So we're going to tell stories. Each of us as individuals will tell stories. These are publicly available on YouTube. So if you want to watch the whole story, you can go back and do that later. But we're going to tell excerpts of these stories during this time together. And the first story is really about empathy. That is what drives us. That is the human condition. What makes us human is this ability to be there empathetically at a heart level for those that we love, particularly those that are hurting. So if someone is in need, we have this incredible capacity to give love. And it's amazing what love can do. Love is very self-generating, right? So in the process of giving that love, we can find ourselves in depletion, and we need to be mindful of that. We need to be mindful of giving ourselves the same loving energy that we're giving to others. And that is what we call self-empathy. So, so let's explore this idea of empathy with your leader in the world at Microsoft, Satya Nadella. So Satya certainly is a world-class CEO, also a father and husband and caregiver. And there's a really amazing, deep, beautiful article from Good Housekeeping. It's dated back in 2017. And it talks about the experience that Satya and his wife Anu had caring for and loving their son Zane through the end of his life, which was in 2022. There is a beautiful story that came through an interview, and I'd like to share that interview for you so that you can hear Satya's perspective in his own words.
So it's really our collective challenge.
What may have been the biggest challenge for Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella came much earlier in his career.
I was 29 when Zane was born. For my wife Anu and me, he was our first child.
At that time, there was no way for Nadella to know how the birth of his son Zane back in 1996 would change his outlook on life.
Excel being our front-end tool.
That's him around that time. Nadella had only been working at Microsoft for 4 years. He and his wife, both overachievers, both only children themselves, anxiously awaiting their firstborn.
The night he was born, everything changed because he was born because of in utero asphyxiation with severe case of cerebral brain damage, which led to cerebral palsy. And then, you know, in all honesty, for a few years thereafter, I was really thrown, a real curveball because all my plans were out, and I sort of said, why did this happen to me? What happened to us?
Questions that continued as Zane grew. He's now 21 years old. He's nonverbal and requires a wheelchair to get around. Nadella says for him, watching his wife put together a team of doctors and therapists, all dedicated to help Zane, changed everything.
And that's what I think ultimately woke me up to recognize that nothing happened to me. Something happened to Zane, and it was my responsibility as a father to step up.
It sounds like it's changed who you are as a father. How's it changed how you are as a CEO?
That realization, that ability to see through others' eyes, I think is one of those hard lessons one only learns through one's own life's experience. But it shapes you, not just at home, but as a leader.
Over here, what are you doing?
Empathy that Nadella says serves him every day.
Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella.
So when he's not speaking to tech conferences like this one in Seattle,
we can teach computers to learn human language.
And leading Microsoft's roughly 120,000 employees worldwide, he's focused on driving innovation, making technology more accessible.
So that we can empower every person.
For people who are blind or have limited vision.
I think it's a man jumping in the air doing a trick on a skateboard.
The company has created an app that narrates the world around them.
Read me the headings.
I see appetizers, Salads.
Microsoft teamed up with former NFL and Washington State football player Steve Gleason, giving him and others with ALS the ability to control a wheelchair with just the gaze of their eyes.
Because of technology, people like me are able to remain productive and purposeful for years, even decades.
I think where technology is going is to really help empower more people to be able to accomplish more. And that's, I think, a responsibility we have.
Microsoft has also made inclusive hiring, bringing on those with disabilities, a priority.
What drives you professionally? As a CEO, ultimately, I do take accountability for the culture that we create. The 100,000 plus people in the company, I want them all to be able to find this Microsoft platform to be useful in them finding deep meaning in their work.
What drives you personally as a husband and a father?
The importance of being able to find that harmony between your life and your work, I think is so important.
Are you getting closer?
Some days I get, and some days I regress it, but each day I try to get better.
Which takes us back to Zane and the journey they have traveled together. Son teaching father about the value of empathy. Father helping son reach his full potential.
How do we really make sure that Zane's life can be rich with love of all the people around him, and we give him every opportunity to live a full life?
I'd like for us to all please take a collective deep breath in honor of Zane. And a deep breath in and release. So empathy. What a beautiful story of empathy. What a brave, courageous, and very transparent and vulnerable leader that uses his life experience to drive purpose. And I think that is the lesson here, right? That is our opportunity as human beings on the planet, is to take our experiences, all the joy that we experience, all the grief that we experience, knowing that they live in the same human heart. This is the yin and the yang, is the joy and the pain. You can't have the lightness without the dark, okay? So using these difficult experiences to drive us into a state of grace and purpose is really what I think the purpose of suffering is all about. And if you have suffered in your life, which I think most of us have in some way, I invite you to reframe that difficult moment or that difficult experience into an empathetic experience. What you went through will make you available, more available at a heart level to someone else when they go through something difficult. Okay, so the purpose of our experience is a lifelong lesson for me. So my turn, I get to tell the story of the Barrett family. Richard and Phyllis Barrett, my parents, are the strongest people I know. Richard was captain of the football team at Western High School. My mother, Phyllis, was head drill team leader of the Silhouette dance team, a troupe of 160 dancers. And they met in high school, fell fast in love, and married at 19 years old. They knew they wanted a very big family, and so they had 5 children in 8 years. And on the right, you can see my mother with the 5 of us. My oldest brother, Richard Adam, was and still is the golden child. He was developing very typically, neurotypically, as children and as a young mother. That was helpful because my mother could then see what a typical progression was like for her baby and her young child. I'm the youngest of the five. You can see me in the bottom row there. But you'll probably notice that David, Jared, and Randy, the second born, the third born, and the fourth born, were not quite developing the same way. You can see their facial features are coarse. They have a specific look. And in fact, we're gaining their ability to walk and talk until about second grade level, and then started losing their ability to walk and talk. And the reason for that was a rare genetic condition called mucopolysaccharidosis, also known as Hunter syndrome. For the left brain thinkers out there, muco stands for mucus, poly stands for a lot, and saccharidosis stands for sugar. So the boys were missing the enzyme they needed to break down certain types of glucose in their bodies, and it built up over time like a gummy substance around their cells, their vital organs, their joints, and their brain. My brothers passed away at 12, 18, and 19 years old. And the stress of the caregiving in our family broke my parents apart. They divorced in 1975. If you stick to the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a Hollywood ending like you could never believe. But just know that in this big, tragic story, were beautiful moments of connection and love. And I think that's what's so amazing about children and also about parents and just about families in general, is that we accept each other. We love each other, and we can tell intuitively, even without words, if someone is happy or sad, frustrated, or elated. Okay, so there is great honoring in loss. I view my brothers as the constellation Orion in the night sky. And I often have conversations with them from the hot tub or on a midnight walk. But this idea of why me, and Satya mentioned it in his interview as well, right? It's this, why do difficult things happen in the world? And I've alluded to it, but I can tell you that my best offering to you is that the purpose of suffering is to just marinate your heart. It's to marinate your heart in these difficult experiences so that you can recognize the joy, so that you can see the beauty around you, and so that you can recognize the pain in another human being, and you can be there for them. And I think that's our call. That's our calling as humanity, is to start being there for each other more than we have been, or that we thought we were capable of being in the past. So that's our story. It brings uncomfortable words into your vernacular when you've gone through these experiences, words like embarrassing and terrifying and grieving. And these are the words that we create space for in Raregivers. So you know the purpose behind why I started this organization, and I've been so honored to lead it. But really know at a deep level that we're not here to fix. We really are here to witness feelings. Just allow people to have the feelings that they have without passing judgment on the feelings, without trying to change those feelings. It's really just witnessing and creating space for people to emote. And that's an odd line item on a budget, right? It's an odd ask of an individual to donate towards a system of support for feelings, right? But I encourage you to really think about this at a heart level, because I know that we can enact incredible change in our community. And this is the year. this is the year. It has been all of these individuals starting to stand up and talk about their feelings, athletes, musicians, actors, celebrities, everyone on social media, it seems like is expressing their emotions more than ever before. I feel like now is the time for us to be able to aggregate those voices and put them actually in service back to the community. So let's talk about another Raregivers 100 nominee. If you haven't seen this article, it was actually on the cover of People magazine just about 2 months ago. So this year in 2024, and Colin Farrell has been very active, very vocal, and very present within his own community, rare disease community of Angelman syndrome, but also for so many other rare families around the world. He just completed a marathon with a dear friend of his who has EB, a rare disease that affects the skin. And so hear from Colin in his own words about his experience in the family.
Say drivers. I've never had crews within our home. It's a very safe space, but I have to or choose to believe that if James knew that doing this could help families and could help other children and young adults who live with special needs, James would say, Dad, what are you talking about? Why are you even asking me? It's a no-brainer. James was very silent baby. He didn't coo, he didn't make any sound at all. I just thought I'd hit the lottery, you know. I thought I have a chill child who's not going to keep me up at night. He'd cry if he was upset, but more than the crying was just the constant adaptation to the idea of sound and encroaching language that a child goes through as a course of their natural evolution. And there was none of that. But I didn't know that at the time. It just, as I said, I thought he was just a chill baby, and anything but chill, if you can hear him. But then he didn't, he just wasn't hitting benchmarks. He wasn't sitting up, he couldn't sit up. You'd sit him up and he'd fall over. He wasn't crawling. He couldn't stay up on his legs at all. So we knew that something was up, developmental delays. I think he was 1.5 years old maybe when he was diagnosed. We took him to get really checked out, and because of certain things that he was displaying, he was diagnosed as having cerebral palsy. And it was at the time, it probably still is, but in less measure, it was a common misdiagnosis because it shared a lot of the same presentations, a lot of the same characteristics. And it wasn't until he was about 2.5 years old that another doctor, pediatric neurologist, spent a little bit of time with him and saw that James, one of the characteristics of Angelman syndrome is outbreaks of laughter. They call it inappropriate outbreaks of laughter, but I don't know if there is such a thing as inappropriate outbreak of laughter if it comes from a sincere place and it lacks malice. I've just obviously qualified it greatly, so maybe there is, but the doctor saw that James was laughing a lot in the office, and he was also doing this movement a lot with his hands. But this pediatric neurologist took a look at James and said to James's mom, has he been tested for Angelman syndrome? And Kim said, what's that? Very few people knew about it at the time. And the doctor said, well, let me just do a genetic test, a blood test. We can just do a genetic mapping and we'll see. And it came back positive. So at least we had one of the biggest things, obviously one of the biggest issues and one of the most significant moments you can experience as a child who has developmental disability or delay is getting a diagnosis, because then if you get a diagnosis you can zero in. There are usually people you can find, whether it's a community just emotionally to lean into so you feel less alone in your struggles, or medical professionals who can actually, and physical therapists who can actually, and people who can have a specific system with which they can present to your child, present to you, and then help your child reach their potential. So getting the diagnosis, I remember the first 2 questions I asked at the time were, what's the life expectancy and how much pain is involved? And the doctor said life expectancy, as far as we can tell, is the same for you and for me. And pain, no, but it's a seizure condition. That was one of the big things. And it's one of the things that parents struggle with greatly, is that our children with Angelman's have seizures. James had plenty of seizures back in the day. I've been in the back of ambulances. I've been in the hospital with him. Thankfully, he hasn't had one in 10 or 11 years, which is amazing.
what a story. And the interview goes on to talk about Colin Farrell Foundation and the formation of this very intentional, purpose-driven mission to create a world that is more sensitive and more supportive of people like James, his son. So I encourage you to watch the rest of that interview, or do your Bing searches or Google searches and find more information about this very vocal and very courageous leader, Colin Farrell. The idea that things don't always need to be fixed, and that it's sometimes outside of our ability to fix, is contrary to human nature, right? We have mastered the art of flying. We've mastered driving. We've mastered science in so many areas. And I do believe in our lifetime, we will start to see the treatments and the cures that so many of our families are desperately looking for. But in the meantime, there are some things that are outside of our control. And the most important thing we can do in those scenarios is to witness the experience, hold space for the love and the feelings and the energy that is coming out of an emotional response to that experience, and do it without judgment. You know, Brené Brown talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And you can Google that one or Bing that one as well, right? But the idea that just sitting with somebody and not trying to fix as they're feeling is the greatest gift that we can give to others and that we can give to ourselves. So that's what we do at Raregivers. We create space for people to emote, and sometimes they need a little bit of help to think about how to do that. So this very pretty picture, this very friendly emotional journey map, is predicated on 287 pieces of published research about the emotional impact on families living with rare, chronic, and complex diseases. So regardless of the disease, the specific set of symptoms, and the specific genetic foundation of that disease, there's a fairly common set of emotional responses that are going to come across a human heart and come across a family. Okay, so right to or left to right in the map is this whole idea that life is going on and suddenly life gets medical. And when life gets medical, you're thrust onto an island, and it's very isolating. You don't have a map, you don't have an understanding of what is to come. And these 6 stages that are presented, noticing changes, adjusting with or without a diagnosis, the realities of shifting responsibilities within the family, and the ongoing, sometimes for decades, of full-time care. The end of life experience, whether it's a physical end of life or it's an end of feeling, this idea that you're grieving the life that you thought you were going to have, what you thought parenting was going to look like, what you thought your loved one's future would look like. Those feelings come up throughout the experience. Even in a diagnostic phase, you can end up in the ER and be in a worry moment about end of life. And always there's this ubiquitous idea of finding meaning in this experience, finding the purpose, trying to understand the why me that we've been talking about. So this is just a construct. It's not the only way to think about things, but it is actually a very effective method. And we've been testing this method for many years with our community, running focus groups, running wellness retreats virtually and in person. And remember that there are moments of reprieve, relief from this experience. And these are the ancient arts of sleep, nature, nutrition, mindfulness. This is how you get off the island, is you tend to your own well-being first, even if it's just in micro moments a day, and then you can sustainably care for others. So Colin was talking about that diagnostic journey, right? You think you have the answer, and then you find out that there may be another diagnosis or a source diagnosis. There's often multiple diagnoses for our loved ones within our community. And don't forget, there's everyday stressors. There's the ongoing challenges of financial navigation and navigating the healthcare system. So really, this model is applicable to any medicalized life. And what we've done, thanks to your support, is we've created the model in community. So we've worked with 160 plus coalition partners and experts to put this together and then create a guide to go along to explain. And now that we have these assets, we're able to actually scale them through multilingual support. And we'll talk about that in a moment. I do want to make sure that you take this away today, okay? That Raregivers 10 essential tips for bringing relief into your life are the things you already know, but we just want to remind you. Really tend to your sleep. Get out in nature. Eat well. Shop well when you're buying your food. Get that nutritious food. Take a few moments of mindfulness, meditations, guided meditations on various different apps, or just a few moments of deep breathing. Certainly physical activity, we know, is what grounds you. Connecting at a social level, finding emotional support, possibly if needed, doing so with a professional counselor. Figuring out what are the self-care skills that actually resonate with you, that you can make into these habitual kinds of experiences. And then as needed, engaging community resources. And by community, I mean neighbors, friends. We just need to ask for help and support. People are intrinsically hardwired to want to be empathetic and to want to help, but sometimes we just need to remind ourselves to ask. Okay, so if you take nothing else away today, please take away your 10 essential tips for relief in your own life and know that it's critically important. All the research shows, particularly in caregiving, stressful events would be maybe a presentation for hundreds of people like today, although I really love what I do, so it doesn't feel stressful to me. But when you have a stressful event, your cortisol levels go up, you tend to get, pretty elevated, and the stress goes up, but it tends to come back down and normalize. The thing about chronic caregiving is that you are elevated and now you're buzzing, okay, at this elevated level. There's lots of rumination going on, anticipation of crisis and non-crisis moments. And it's in that chronic stress state that we know the way to bring relief are the ancient arts that I just mentioned to you, the 10 essential tips. Those things that you can habitually bring into your life will actually heal your telomeres. And if you don't know what a telomere is, it's the glow sticks at the end of each of your cells that when they dim to dark is the end of your life. But you can repair your telomeres. So even if stress is impacting you, you can do the things that you know you need to do, try to find joy in doing them, and try to just take sips of self-care instead of big, giant, leaps in self-care. Just small sips, literally a couple of moments a day of gratitude, journaling, walking, stepping out in the sunshine, taking 3 deep breaths while your coffee's percolating. Those micro moments a day are what let off the steam of chronic stress, whether it's in caregiving or in any other scenario. We say that Raregivers often suffer from CTSD, chronic traumatic stress, not post-traumatic stress, because it's a repetitive experience. And therefore, we have to offer repetitive solutions. And those solutions are interesting because a lot of times we're like, oh yeah, we've got that covered. We've got support in this area. But there's a really amazing article in Psychology Today that talks about the different kinds of support. So informational support and tangible support, we need it, we want it. We want to understand, what is this medical condition? What are the treatment options? How do I get my doctor's appointments with the right person? Possibly, is there a clinical trial? Am I getting kickbacks on my insurance claims, right? So these informational and tangible support offerings where we receive information are critically important, but they're often stress-inducing, okay? So just know that what we're talking about at Raregivers is emotional support and companionship. And in this Psychology Today article, they actually surveyed thousands of individuals, and the preference is for emotional support and companionship over any other kind of support. That's what makes you feel like you can go on, like you can handle this another day, right? So emotional support and companionship. Okay, so now that gets very interesting. How do we bring emotional support and companionship into a community of caregiving? And part of it is showing the world what caregiving looks like so that we're not operating in isolation. And I'm so grateful to Bradley Cooper. Bradley, I haven't met you yet, but I'm so grateful to you for shining a light with Well-Beings and bringing this 4-part documentary series into the planet. I think it's going to be released later this year or next year, but let's hear from Bradley and the team at Well-Beings on why it's so important to recognize the impact of caregiving.
Like most people, I didn't even think about caregiving until my father was diagnosed with cancer. My dad was somebody who I idolized. I used to dress up like him when I was a kid in kindergarten and get made fun of because I wanted to wear like a suit and a tie. And then to go from that to giving him a bath is quite a traumatic thing.
Everyone has a care story. Caring for our families is the most important and invisible work that we will ever do. Do you think we look alike? Here you go. Doesn't matter who you are, where you live, what you do, where you come from, you need care. How do you feel this morning? You good? And we have this invisible army who are essentially holding us all up as families and therefore holding the entire economy up. People are doing everything they can and more, and it's simply not sufficient because we need to have a recognition that care is a public good.
So my dad is actually a medically retired Navy SEAL, and now he's like helping me just get stronger.
I'm here caring for 2 sick people, which is definitely harder than anything I've ever done in my life.
There's just this simmering crisis. Everyone is burning out, whether it's the care worker or the family member. Everyone is under extreme duress.
I have reintroduced a credit for caring bill that is for those that are caring for their loved ones.
We're trapped in a caregiving crisis, within an economic crisis, within a healthcare crisis. I'm going to change the paradigm.
Now we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to support all of our families and our caregivers too.
It really is up to us. All of us can help raise the banner for caregivers. That's why I'm excited to partner with WIDA and produce this documentary. Together, with your help, we can make a difference.
Isn't that amazing? These stories are the stories that we need to hear. We need to know that there's loving attention and energy, that there's legislation and policy change, that there's hope for caregivers to possibly receive financial compensation. And there's hope, certainly, to be witnessed in the caregiving journey and in the experience of living a medicalized life, regardless of what your experience is, either as a young adult or adult patient, as a caregiver for that loved one, as a healthcare professional that is trying with all heart and soul to bring relief into that family unit. So while the science is advancing, we believe that we can deliver emotional relief today. And we are doing it every single day. It requires huge philanthropic and corporate support in order to do it at the scale that we intend. But we are doing it every single day. And in fact, we've grown from 7 women in our living room in 2019 to over 22,000 families today. So we're so grateful for the support that we've received, because it's enabled us to push out the Raregivers methodology through rare disease centers of excellence like Children's Hospital of Orange County. We're working with experts from Seattle Children's, from Boston Children's, Sydney General Hospital in Australia, hospitals in Latin America, Europe, APJ. I'm going to be flying to New Delhi and presenting this methodology in Hindi, thanks to the Microsoft team for translating our methodology into multiple languages so that we can reach the healthcare providers that are holding space for our community. And we directly hold space. We have weekly support groups. We have wellness retreats that we've hosted in person at our wellness center in Orange County, California, and virtually with participation around the world. And all of that takes funding. We can't fund the healthcare experts to come in and host the wellness groups and the wellness retreats without your support. So just know that every single donation you make makes a huge difference. It goes directly into the support services that we provide for families. And it goes into us elevating the conversation, aggregating moments that are already happening. Earlier today, or earlier this year, I was at the Today Show. That's my daughter on the left. And a board member on the right. And we were standing outside with our Raregivers sign and basically saying, pay attention to this community. There were 100 other folks there with us, and we'll do that again on Rare Disease Day, February 28 of 2025. We are highlighting Raregivers through spotlights on social media and our email campaigns. And I'm so excited about the Raregivers 100, because that is a way for us to allow the community, allow the public to nominate the voices and the stories that are marinating our hearts, right? That are impacting us in a deep and meaningful way. So keep an eye out for these campaigns. Know that these are tied to our responsibilities to our fellow man and woman. These are part of our moral contribution to society. These are ways for us to bring relief at a systematic level and at a heart level. And we're hoping that you will support the work that we do, both at an individual level and at a corporate level and a donor level. Thank you so much. So Diversity, equity, and inclusion is talked about a lot. And if you haven't heard of the B, that stands for belonging. Deloitte is the one that coined that measurement. So the idea is that you need to feel like you belong as part of a community. And a big part of that is seeing yourself reflected in the community. So we can't reach 3.5 million people unless we are mobile first and multilingual, because if we're going to talk about emotions, we need to be talking about them in people's native languages. And so it's the Microsoft team that has helped us grow into this capability and also grow into our intentions for engaging on a global basis. So from 7 women in our living room to over 22,000, I got to update the slide, over 22,000 families. We've been training up support staff in the hospitals. We've been offering hours and hours, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. This isn't like an hour on a family conference, right? This is a daily commitment that we make to this community to bring emotional relief. And we need your support in order to be able to do that. Let me just take a few moments, and if you'll indulge me, I really would just love to highlight what the Microsoft team did during the last hackathon. Welcome to Raregivers for Caregivers, our AI-generated emotional interactive journey map. My name is Cristol Barrett O'Loughlin. I'm the founder and CEO of Raregivers. This is our 5th hackathon with Microsoft, and I'm so honored to say we've had 28 employee volunteers from all around the world, Canada, the US, India, Africa. We've been following a follow the sun model. And we've developed 3 amazing tracks that will enable us to reach 3.5 million Raregivers by 2026. Team Translate, as you can see, took this amazing interactive journey map and 41-page guidebook and translated it into 12 languages. 4 primary languages, Chinese, Spanish, Hindi, and French. And also using SharePoint, was able to translate into more than a dozen other languages behind the scenes. In addition to that, we took these versions and we built an interactive web-based experience. Our team interactive used Azure, used Copilot, used Figma, used storytelling and storyboarding, working day and night to put together a web-based interactive experience. And Team Amplify is there to get the word out to the world, not only designing a global awareness campaign, but used AI to generate our social posts, to help identify hashtags and potential influencers to engage in our community. We actually vetted that service with over a dozen pharmaceutical companies, patient advocacy organizations, and families, and launched that amplification campaign yesterday on day 3 of the hackathon. So watch us as we reach 500,000 hackers, caregivers, and any that care about rare, chronic, and complex disease. Incidentally, rare is not rare. 1 in 10 families worldwide are caring for a loved one with a rare genetic disease. These are your neighbors, these are your friends, these are your colleagues at work. And I'm here to tell you that if it wasn't for the Microsoft team, we would not be able to deliver the relief that we can deliver. So thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we can't wait to hack with you again.
The initial stage of a rare giver's emotional journey is noticing. A rare giver notices
Oh my gosh, I get chills seeing and reminiscing about all the late nights and middle of the night hackathon conversations that we had. Would also like to take a moment, in addition to thanking the Microsoft team, there were many volunteers from other organizations and sponsorship and expert offerings from these organizations and many individuals along the way to get us to the current state, which is we are ready. We've been going on the slow and steady validation, make sure ethics reviewed, independent review board, research backed, everything's ready to go. Now we're just like, let's elevate on the hockey stick and get as many families into our community as possible. And that's where you come in. It does take hard dollars to achieve our goals. It does take specific investment in order to achieve what we hope to achieve. 3.5 million takes significant philanthropic investment. Think of that. We need to go from 22,000 to 3.5 million. So every donation, $100, funds a live support call between one of our experts and a member of our community, a rare mother and a rare father, typically who's been newly diagnosed and is in crisis. $200 will actually sponsor someone to join our support groups for a year. I mean, that is so amazing. And $500, we actually send a wellness kit into the home. Needle fear and needle phobia, when you're living a medicalized life, is fairly ubiquitous. And we have a proven strategy, a webinar, and a wellness kit that we send into the home to provide support to our rare families. We do host in-person wellness retreats, and $1,000 can bring someone into community with another father or mother. Our guardianship level allows people to be sponsored for a full year. And we do have a few archangels. $5,000. Imagine that for Microsoft for a moment. Every single one of these donation levels will be matched during the month of October when you make your donations via Benevity. We're working on a matching grant opportunity for those that are outside the Microsoft community. So please, please support our work today. It is directly tied to relief for these individuals, and they need us to stand up for them. Last but not least is a saying we have in our family. Cristol, Barrett, O'Loughlin, grin and bear it. You know that our family has been through quite a bit. And even though Richard and Phyllis did divorce in 1975, they had 35 years apart, but our daughter Chloe was born 17 years ago. She's the third generation of Hunter syndrome carrier, my mother, myself, and my daughter now. But just the beauty and the magic of her coming into the world brought my parents back together. They've been back together for 17 years now, and just last year we actually married them again in the house that they used to live in back in the 60s. So if you have the time, please do watch this story, Grin and Bear It. And this is the moment where I will say goodbye and thank you so much for your support.
We went to high school together and became high school sweethearts.
Got married 60 years ago. We had some tragic events happen and we got divorced. In a civil marriage, you're married until death do you part. And in the temple marriage, you're married for time and all eternity. I didn't feel that we would reconnect in this life, which did happen. But I always knew that we would when we went to heaven.
Richard and Phyllis are my parents. Richard was the oldest. David, Jared, and Randy were born after, and I was the baby that came along in the end. Although Richard, the oldest, was developing, David and Jared were having harder times lifting their head, walking. She said, "Why can't David straighten his arm?" And that was the clue for the pediatrician to look a little deeper into what was happening. My brothers were diagnosed with a disease called mucopolysaccharidosis or Hunter syndrome. 3 brothers that passed away at 12, 18, and 19 years old. Hunter syndrome makes you stunted in your growth. So they were too big for a children's casket and too small for an adult casket. My father made by hand all of their caskets. He really shielded us, right, Richard and I, from the tragedy of what was happening.
We went to marriage counselor and tried to work it all out. This is our marriage or not last.
They widowed within a year of each other, the same year that our daughter Chloe was born. I'm witnessing my parents bringing forth the love that was there from the very, very beginning. 60 years after the first time they were married, they're getting married again.
There's that saying that love is hard to find. And I think that it's harder to find a couple that shares a love with themselves and other people at the same time.
Fell in love with her, and we get married right here in our house.
They're able to be together, have each other's company and love to keep them both going.
There's so much heaviness to it, you know, but the fact that the family persevered and held everything together.
Everybody should learn what love is about through this journey. I'm Richard and Phyllis. During our marriage, we're going to be lighting 3 candles to bring David, Jared, and Randy into the room with us.
The love that Richard and Phyllis kindled over 60 years ago has endured the decades of hurdles and heartaches that a very difficult world has managed to throw them away.
I promise that I will greet you with a smile in the morning and share a prayer with you at night.
I have become loving of you more and more and more as each day goes by.
You may now kiss each other.
David, Jared, and Randy, we are the stars in the night sky, the constellation Orion, and they are watching us from above.
Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate your time today. I hope you have been inspired, and I hope that you find more joy and more love and more self-care in your life.
Thank you so much, Crystal.